I'm very standard four seam, just directly on the seams. And I really just try to get it as efficient as possible. And it's never going to be an elite movement pitch for me. It's really just a surprise pitch that is a little bit harder than my sinker and has very different movement than my sinker. And that's really all I'm trying to get. My sinker is the pitch that I've thrown my entire career. I think that I didn't know that I was seam shifting it in the moment. That was until really I got into like AA with the Yankees and they started to talk about that. I think it became more of a thing then. But because of my arm slot and because I was so far across my body, I'll keep it on camera. I'm directly on the seams, just very normal sinker. But because I was so far across my body, the only way for me to get it even close to the zone was if I cut it back to the zone. And so by cutting it, I didn't realize that I was actually starting that seam shift. I never was pronating it. I never had spin efficiency and drop my wrist angle. It would stay here. And just to be able to get it back to the plate, I'd have to cut it. And that's where, like I said, that black circle here is on the ball. And as I'm throwing it, it's coming in at you this way, which is technically cutter spin, and then starts to wobble. And that's when I get some arm side and some sink.
That's really interesting because I don't know if you saw, but Chris Sale learned he changed his changeup to learn how, like cutting his changeup to make it run, which breaks people's minds when you think about that. Same thing what you're saying. Like people are like, what? You're cutting your two seamer? That doesn't make any sense.
And it's one of those things where it does have to be kind of perfect with seam orientation, because if you have the seams wrong, then it's just going to cut on you. That's like if you hold a four seam grip and try to throw it from my slot, it's not going to get arm side. It's all going to be kind of cut to it. So I feel bad for the catcher that was with Sale as he was trying to learn that changeup, and I'm sure he cut a couple before he actually got it. But the cut changeup is one that it to me shouldn't go that way, but it just does. And I'm similar in that sense where I try to throw my changeup just like I do my sinker. But to me, the changeup, I don't even think it matters the movement of a changeup. It's strictly conviction behind it, making it look like a fastball and having it come out in the same release, and then obviously just speed differential. The best, like Tommy Camley is one that I played with a lot in the minor leagues and big leagues, and like he threw it however many times in the playoffs, and as a hitter, you have to be sitting on that pitch. You know it's coming, but because he has such good arm speed and it comes through, you're like, whoop, this could be the 95, and then it just drops off the table. So,
that was ridiculous.
He's incredible that way.
Let's see the grip on that one. You're,
I'm directly on that seam there. I want to try to get the fattest part of this, fattest part going across here. That's where I want my fingers to be, and then I just lay everything flat. It's almost circly, but I keep my thumb more underneath it. I don't actually connect there as a circle changeup, but I just hold it here, and it's the same thing. I'm trying to come through. Just like my sinker, where I'm kind of cutting it on this side, and then now the circle would be right here that's facing me as it goes through. So my main thing, every time I'm throwing it, I'm actually trying to throw it glove side, because that's when I actually feel like I'm getting around and cutting it back that way, and when I can actually see the movement go. If I'm trying to throw it arm side, away to a lefty, into a righty, that's when I just totally drop the wrist, and it's just a straight horizontal ball, which is usually never commanded for me.
Yeah, your changeup, I think you're underselling how nasty it is. You're saying it's one of the nastier changeups in baseball. You had legit like 2 feet of movement on some of those this year too.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's changeup to me is it's just a total field pitch, but I think it's impossible to game plan for, and especially if you're going to have a pitch that has similar spin. I know we talked about spin a little bit before, and hitters being able to see spin and adjust. Changeup's got similar spin to the sinker. If you're coming through with same arm speed and same arm slot, I don't understand how a hitter can get it unless they're actually just late on the fastball. If they're late on the fastball, then they're going to be timed up for the changeup. But I'm assuming most hitters want to be timed up for the fastball, so that's why it's really hard for hitters to get to the changeup.
Yeah, and I also question whether hitters do see spin or they're picking up something else. Like most guys, like Maddox told me, no hitter, like he obviously hit too. And he was like, oh yeah, you can't hit and see spin. You can see spin if you're catching it, but you can't really process it quick enough to actually make that judgment.
I think a lot of hitters will just see something different. I don't know if they'll know that it's spin, if they'll see arm slot, if they'll see even just like a timing or difference in your mechanics. And as soon as they see something different, they know it's not fastball, because they're timed up for the fastball, they're seeing fastball. And then if they say, Oh, I saw it pop. Oh, I saw the hand get around the ball. Oh, I saw fingers on top of the ball. Different things that they just see are different, and it could be spin. Then that's them where they can hesitate and then fire on the 10-mile-an-hour difference. I'd say sweeper is the hardest pitch that I learned. It started, Greg Weissert, who's the reliever on the Red Sox, was the one that first gave me the grip.
Dude, he's nasty too, and another guy with a funky mechanics.
And Greg's one you might need to talk to because he is so cerebral with it. I genuinely think he should be the pitching coach of every team that he's on because he's making every single pitcher on that staff better just based on his knowledge of the game. But he was the first one that actually taught me to crank my grip, I'll say. So his grip's actually, I think it was Chaz Rowe that first did it, where it was on here, and it's totally cranked. So you can almost see how there's no space here, and my middle finger is kind of bent, or it's like turning sideways. Instead of just laying flat on the ball, I'm cranking it into the grip. And by doing so, now the only place for the ball to escape is out where I want it to escape. I'm never going to back this up because it's never going to come out this way because of how much pressure I'm putting in between these fingers here. To me, it felt more comfortable to be on this side of the seam instead of here where Greg is. So I was here for a long time and still couldn't figure it out. And then Corey Kluber was my teammate in 21. And the funny story is I was throwing a bullpen in Texas and trying to work on my slider and just could not get it. It was just very loopy and lazy and nothing was sharp like I wanted it to be. And Kluber was watching the bullpen and just said, I feel like we have similar arm slots and just try my grip. So he gave me his grip, and this was at the time the Kluber ball because nobody knew what a sweeper was. I felt like it was him, Chaz Rowe, and Adam Ottavino were the three that were throwing Kluber balls or today's sweepers. And so he actually moved his finger back a little bit down on the ball. He still cranked it and then had his fingers together on that seam there. And for some reason, it just clicked. His mechanic cue was to feel like I'm actually shortening my stride. And by shortening my stride, I felt like I got more on top of the ball. And that was one thing I learned with teaching the sweeper. If you're a guy that has a high slot, you actually want to feel like you're on the side of the ball. If you're a guy with a low slot, you want to feel like you're on top of the ball. And so by me shortening my stride, it almost made me climb my arm slot. And like the first one I threw had 18 horizontal and +5 vert. And I was like, oh, this is it right here. And I started to develop it in bullpens for the next couple move. Oh, well, the ironic story, sorry. The next day, Kluber threw his no-hitter in Texas. And I was like, I have to throw this pitch now. Kluber's the one teaching me this. And then I actually think the first time I broke it out in game was when I threw an immaculate inning against the Red Sox. And so that 100% changed my career. I felt like I then had a starter's arsenal because I had a pitch that I could command that was going horizontal. Everything I had was sinker, changeup, and then forcing that had run ride. But I never had a good slider that's going away from righties.
How do you feel like it comes out of your hand?
For me, I'm literally trying to get as far in front of the ball as possible. So my feel is absolutely getting to the front of the ball before I release it. But I know it actually pops out, and then my pointer finger is the last thing that touches it there. But I think the reason why I'm able to get my pointer finger to be the last to touch is because I have to really get my middle finger to the front. If my middle finger's to the front, then the pointer finger has to kick it. And that's where it then becomes such a specific pitch, because if my pointer finger doesn't kick it, then it's just like a really bad kind of lazy sweeper because it doesn't actually kick into the correct seam orientation. Once I got that correct seam orientation, that's when you get the 20s, the 24 horizontals that you look at and it looks like a gust of wind is actually taking it horizontally. But it was definitely a very tough pitch to like wrap my head around.
Yeah, now it's just absolutely disgusting. And you couldn't have learned it from better folks. Like, I'm thinking about the origin of the sweeper. Like, again, I'm writing about it in my book. And to me, Corey Kluber is patient zero of the sweeper. Like, we didn't know what to call it, but it was just this ridiculous late movement. And you mentioned Chaz Rowe, who I absolutely loved putting out there because his stuff was like, it looked like alien crap.
Oh, yeah. I think Greg Weissert learned it from your interview with Chaz Rowe because that's when he changed the grip and then kind of understood what he was doing. And Greg's such a student of the game that it like quickly snapped for him. And then that took off his minor league career where how are you supposed to not move up the guy that's throwing these 20+ inch horizontals, sweepers, and teaching other guys on the team how to do it as well. Like he's a valuable commodity.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And then what do we got left?
And then I just developed like what I call my gyro slider, but it's really like a baby sweeper. And so to me, four seam grip offset just a little bit so I can kind of get in this seam here. And I'm trying to keep it as close to 0-0 as possible, but from my slot, I think it's really hard to do. So I'll try, and then I try to keep it as close to 0 vert as possible. But I'd say anywhere from like 2 to 7 horizontal is where I'm okay with. But it's really just a pitch that I want to be able to command, get strike one. It's obviously not one of my sexy pitches, but there are a lot of hitters that take 0-0 spin at a 85% clip, and it's really hard to locate the sweeper for a strike on that outside part of the plate. I want to be able to rip my sweeper whenever. And so the little small sweeper or gyro, whatever, is just an easier pitch for me to command and kind of steal strikes. So I think I only threw it 5 to 8% of the time this year. But it became a weapon for me just to be able to show a different pitch. And that's just, I'm right kind of on that seam. And Ruben, our pitching coach, told me chase the seam. So obviously you can see the seam is running this way. As I'm pitching it, I'm trying to chase that seam. And so as soon as it's coming off, that's kind of where my hand's going. And because I have a lower slot, I needed, again, to get my finger to the front of the ball, because if I'm not getting to the front of the ball, it's just backing up and staying arm side on me. So it was a pitch that I didn't know was going to be as effective as it was. But I think just because I have a lot of horizontal movement on the two main pitches that I throw, it gave me something in between that I could either almost jam the hitter on or shock a hitter. If they see that spin and on the outside part of the plate, oh, that's ball, it's going to keep going off the plate, and it kind of stayed there. Or I got lucky a few times, or I guess it kind of just worked out a few times. I'd leave it arm side, and that's the hanging sweeper. That's the one that's now going to finish middle, and it almost stayed in on them, and hitters weren't used to me having a smaller slider. And I got some jam shot early contact outs, or even if it's like a 2-0 slider that I can get a weak contact, it's as a starting pitcher, those are gold, you know?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Two things about that. One, I haven't heard the chase the seam cue, and I love it.
Yeah.
That's a very good way to put it. And number two, Driveline was just talking about the concept of a bridge pitch, which is a non-nasty pitch that sets hitters up for your nasty pitches. Like they're either taking it because they think it's a sweeper, and it's really not, like, metrically not a stuff plus pitch, but it can be effective. And also then later on, they may see something and say, oh, that's that crappy ass slider thing that he's throwing. And all of a sudden swing at it, and they're getting a sweeper that they're missing by 2 feet.
Absolutely. It was fun to try to figure out where I can sequence this. Whether it's, like you said, it's a guy that I can go backdoor sinker, take strike one, and then slider away from or just whatever on the outside part of the plate. And they see the spin, and they see it's only this much movement, and it finishes there for a strike. And then I throw the sweeper that starts here, but now it finishes here. Like, it's got 10 more inches of horizontal, and they swing at that thinking it's going to stay on the plate. So like you said, it's that bridge pitch that was huge for me, because it's such a different feel and release than my sweeper that I never was worried that it was going to mold into that, where I feel like a lot of guys have like cut ride four seam, cutter, slider, sweeper, and they're throwing the cutter and the slider, and it's the exact same release, and now they're blending into one pitch. I felt like I was able to really keep both pitches as two separate movement profiles, and then it was just figuring out the command and when to throw them.